So this is potentially huge news for Pakistan. For the last 3 years, Pakistan with another country has been exploring resources within its own territorial waters. The suspicion has long been that Pakistan has got significant amounts of gas and oil reserves within its own land, or at least within the surrounding territorial waters. And now that suspicion has been proven and could actually exceed everyone's expectations. Some estimates suggest that this discovery constitutes the 4th largest oil and gas reserves in the world. That would represent hundreds of billions of dollars that could be used to revitalize the economy and society in Pakistan. So could this discovery be a catalyst in changing Pakistan's destiny? We know the current state of Pakistan's economy is currently in a shambles. The debt Pakistan owns is equivalent to over 70% of its GDP. That's over $200 billion worth of debt. And it's a debt that's constantly increasing each year. The country's trade is in a huge deficit too, meaning the amount of money it makes from exports do not cover the amount of money they have to spend on imported goods like oil and gas as well as other goods. Inflation rate has been extremely high and recently has only just come just under 10%. Compare that to the UK, which is around 2.2%. Unemployment is projected to be about 8% this year, but more worryingly 40% of the population of Pakistan are below the poverty line according to the World Bank. So could this newly discovered oil gas reserves solve all of these huge problems and propel Pakistan in what some call a first world economy? The problem in Pakistan has never been about resources, whether to do with human resources or physical resources. Pakistan has a huge population. It's the 5th largest populated country in the world. That means Pakistan has a potentially large internal market for its own goods and services that it produces. It doesn't even have to look and focus on foreign markets for trade when you have such a massive internal market within the country. Its population is also young, which means that it is potentially massive workforce to generate wealth within the country. And in terms of resources, Pakistan has not only some of the most fertile lands in the world, but also has other mineral and energy resources within its own country. For instance, Pakistan arable land on its own, as reported by the World Bank in 2020, stands at a significant 40.12%, and compare that to China's only 7% of arable land. So the problem has never been about resources. It's always been about the system and leadership that has mismanaged the economy since its inception. Let me give you an example just to prove this point. Over 25 years ago now, Pakistan discovered it had one of the largest copper and gold reserves in the world. Current estimates place the amount at around $1 trillion. Yes, $1 trillion. Yet for decades this potential gold mine, pun intended, has been largely left unmined. If your debt is around $200 billion, then just the wealth of this mine alone could wipe out that debt, as well as provide so much needed wealth for the entire country. Yet due to the corrupt politicians trying to gain a piece of this wealth for themselves, this mining operation has been left stagnant for decades. And even then, what is the solution to this? How are Pakistan's politicians looking to mine this $1 trillion copper and gold mine? They seek to sell it off to private foreign-based companies to invest and then exploit the wealth for itself. The actual investment to begin mining this wealth is around $4 to $5 billion. Sounds a lot, but the billions of dollars that have been stolen by Pakistan's politicians like the Zardaris or the Sharifs or the Bhuttos could have easily covered the initial investment. Again, it's not just copper and gold. Pakistan has some of the largest potential coal reserves in the world. Although it's considered low grade because of lower carbon content, but due to the large amount Pakistan has, which is around 186 billion tons of coal reserves, it could yield massive potential wealth for Pakistan. So why doesn't Pakistan invest in its resources to unlock all this untapped wealth? Well, there's two reasons for this. Firstly, the global capitalist order pushes for public resources to be privatized. In fact, whenever loans are given out by Western institutions like the IMF or the World Bank, or you have direct foreign investment from countries, they condition this loan that their resources, i.e. Pakistan's resources, must be sold to their Western or even Chinese-based companies. They indebt these countries like Pakistan, push them into a never-ending cycle of loan repayments, and then force them to sell off their most valuable assets, whether that's copper, gold, coal, or gas and oil, whatever. And Pakistan's politicians are willing to do this. Why? Because they get, secondly, kickbacks. That is, Pakistan politicians would rather facilitate negotiate a deal with foreign corporations if it means they can get money from making this deal. That's what a kickback means. And why do you think politicians like Zardari were called Mr. 10%? Because he was getting at least 10% on various government contracts being sold. So is the discovery of oil and gas reserves in Pakistan going to go down the same route of privatization to foreign-based companies and corrupt politicians having their pockets lined to make these deals happen? No, there is optimism, but we need to be aware that the current system, whether in Pakistan or, to be quite frank, any other Muslim country, are not going to harness the potential that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted this ummah with. Let's be clear, selling off your most strategic assets to Western or even Chinese-based companies is not the way forward, but rather Islam has its own unique economic system that defines what is a public resources that cannot be privatized from those things that can be privately owned. Oil, gas reserves, copper and gold mines, or massive reserves of coal cannot be privatized under the Islamic system. It's haram, it's forbidden. These are determined from the Sunnah, from the Sharia, as being public resources, which means that if the government on behalf of the people were to extract, refine and sell these resources, then any wealth must be put back into the state treasury known as the Baitul Mal, and then that wealth has to be used for the people. Whether that means better infrastructure like roads, hospitals, schools, or even housing, or funding for the police and judges for with better wages, thus working to eliminate systemic corruption from that society. The point is, you don't sell off your wealth so that your most strategic assets are controlled by foreign-based companies based in foreign lands. Rather, you utilize that wealth in order to benefit the people, in order to elevate that society. Look, if these foreign companies from foreign lands control your most strategic resources, they effectively control your economy. And if they control your economy, they thus will effectively control your politics and your politicians. Foreign companies based in foreign lands controlling your country. And we know that the West doesn't want to see a rival power to the global Western hegemony. Hence, they indebt countries, they force them to sell off their strategic assets so that they can control them and therefore maintain their control and influence around the world. Look, Pakistan isn't poor, but it does have poor leadership, and part of the reason they get away with this poor leadership is the lack of clarity as to how our economies should be run. They are willing to sell off your strategic assets because we are ignorant of what should be done with these strategic assets. Islam gives us a unique system, solves problems, and tells us how to manage our resources and our assets. When we understand this, we can better understand what type of leadership we need and how to hold the current leadership to account, hold them to account according to an Islamic standard, what Islam says about economics. It's like not knowing how to pray, and the Imam leads Salah and he prays 4 rakats for Salatul Maghrib instead of 3. If the Jama'ah following him are ignorant of the rules of Salah, then who will hold the Imam to account? Who will hold them to a fixed standard and say, no, it's not 4 rakats for Maghrib, it's 3? Nobody, because they're ignorant. So it's the same thing. In this situation, we need to learn about how our assets and our resources should be managed based on Islam, and then engage in political action so that our countries can be instilled with a God-given vision, a vision established from the Sharia, one that defines how hundreds of billions of dollars worth of assets can be utilized, that will not only lift our countries out of poverty, but then allow the Muslim world to become a leading nation that would be a bright light for the entire world. But it starts with seeing Islam as a solution for our societies, and then learning the details with a view to practically implement it in our countries, inshallah. So could this be a turning point for Pakistan's economic future? Yes, it could, but only under an Islamic leadership applying Islamic solutions, inshallah.